Shut up and sit down.
Yeah. All right. So I'm Terra, and that's Ted, and we're going to talk today about, what are we talking about, Ted?
I think we're going to talk about males being generally mediocre in a professional and some personal capacity as well.
All right. Let's go with that. What?
Okay. Well, before we were talking, I was just giving a story, and I'll condense it now. But basically, my friends had a premature kid a couple weeks ago, and they weren't even in the city they live in. They were about probably 150 miles away. And it was a Thursday night, and my friend sends his boss a bunch of emails saying, like, hey, I got a lot of stuff to sort through. I got this premature kid. I don't know how I'm going to get him back to where we actually live. So kind of like give me till Monday or Tuesday to figure stuff out. So I wake up Friday morning, and I got a couple texts about news of this kid. And then I got another text series from this dude where he's saying, like, his boss has already sent him, like, 18 work emails that morning. And I was just thinking to myself, like, okay, obviously women are, like, the gender that go through the childbirth, but I could never see, like, a female manager do that. And obviously that's, like, a personal example. Now I'm going to kind of do, like, a broader one. But I was just thinking, like, definitely since the middle of 2017, I feel like it's been on my mind. Like, the whole flip side of the Me Too discussion is like how ridiculous guys can be in terms of like how they treat women or like perceive women.
Right.
And it's like, that's a personal context, but then professionally, I've just known like so many male managers that are just like hideously incompetent. So I'm kind of like, I felt like it'd be interesting to have like a general conversation about like whether that's true, and if so, why it's true, you know?
Right. Yeah, and I was saying that I had a manager, I just, that decided to assign me reading for a retail job while I was in the hospital for a heart surgery. Like, that's something I feel like I might do. I would never do that.
Right. For sure. I think, like we were saying a little bit before, I feel like there's an argument from that George Clooney movie, Up in the Air, which I guess was also a book, probably before it was a movie, that, like, men attach all this, like, self-worth and relevance to work, in part because they, like, can't have kids themselves, so they need something to, like, center their ecosystem. And, I mean, maybe there's something to that, because I think if you're like looking to work for self-worth, which is a pretty dangerous deal anyway, because like most jobs aren't really designed to love you back, then like maybe you get so caught up in work that you're just like so into the task level stuff instead of the bigger picture stuff that like you kind of come off as mediocre at everything because you're trying to keep too many balls in the air.
Yeah.
That's like one theory I've had about a lot of dudes. The other cool thing I once read was like probably about a year ago, I got some book called The New American Male Sexuality, which sounds like it's pretty salacious, but it's basically just like a textbook. And they had this guy from Cal Berkeley in there. Hold on. There's this guy from Cal Berkeley in there, like a psychotherapist basically.
Yeah.
He was saying that if you take any guy in human history from like Hitler to like Mussolini to like Trump to anybody that you like might associate as like, oh, they're evil or whatever, like if you sit them in a room and tell them you have 20 minutes and a safe space to discuss your relationship with your father, like all those dudes would end up crying. Like it can take any like hardened dude and break him down. So sometimes I think that's the part of it too, is like like obviously every gender like grows up inside their mom or like, you know, comes to term inside their mom. But for dudes, it's different because like you had that relationship, you get taken out of it when you come into the world. And then it's like, you're not supposed to ever be close with your mom again because you're like a pussy or like a sissy.
Right.
And then usually your dad is not like 100% like emotionally there because like he probably wasn't developed that way either. So
Right.
guys like they don't have like a more in how they treat women, and I know guys that treat women well, so it's not like across the board, but I would say a lot of guys treat women like crap, and I think like it's because they don't really have like the emotional like empathy like context or trigger for like what they should be doing. So I mean we don't need to get like deeply personal on relationships or whatever, but if you have thoughts about like dudes in general being like good or bad at like the empathy side of the coin, I mean that'd be cool to hear about.
I think that and I agree with you. I think that so Brene Brown, I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Yeah.
She, in one of her first books, talks about how there was a guy that approached her during one of her book signings, and he said, if you think that the women in my life aren't the hardest people on me, then you're fooling yourself. And so then she started studying women or men as well. She had just been studying women in shame, and she started studying men in shame as well. And I think that, my generation, which I think is close to your generation anyway, we're right back to back. We still were raised with that, grow up, find a husband, get married. We were still living in a time when one income would almost cover all of the bills.
Right.
Which really doesn't play a lot into relationships now, except that people do get married I know people that are married for financial purposes, that it's a contract, and it's not that they don't get along, but they just,
Right.
It's just better on them.
Yep.
So they are more likely, and in that situation, they do put up with, I think, a lot more crap from each other, a lot more poor treatment. I do want to say I don't think women are exempt from being assholes.
Right. I don't either.
Right. But and being hard, and being hard on men. But I think that women my age were, for the most part, we're still the first latchkey kids. We were still, a lot of us didn't have good relationships with our families either.
Yep, for sure.
And
it also
I know that my grandma expected a lot out of my grandpa, an awful lot,
Yeah.
And in return, he expected a lot out of her. I mean, she was taking care of the household. She also worked out of the home, which was unusual for their time.
Right.
I mean, they both grew up during the Depression, and she also worked out of the house, and had kids. So it was very unusual. So I guess their relationship's a little different.
Right.
I think with the mediocrity, I don't see a lot of ambition in a lot of the men I know.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're okay with status quo for the most part, which kind of is a letdown for somebody like me, who's a little bit more driven than that. On that note, I don't try to be harsh on them. I ask why, because I'm curious, why don't you want something better? And a lot of it is just meh. I don't really care that much.
Yep, I would say that. Well, I think what's funny too is like we think that we live in this super innovative entrepreneurial time, and obviously in terms of the tech stack, we do to a certain extent. But I've seen stuff like the I want to say like the 1995 Fortune 500 employed like 20 million people.
Yeah.
In 2005 employed like 27 million. Now it employs like 34 million. So, okay, obviously like boomers, Gen X people had kids, started having kids. They're entering the workforce at some level now. So there's more people, but like that's a huge rise in bureaucracy, and the number of basically like non-revenue facing roles getting hired by like mid-sized to large companies is like 84% outpaces like strategic type roles. So that's kind of like points to what you're saying to me, is that it's really easy if you want to work for a mid-sized to large company to get a job that pays okay or like above average, and like you basically don't do anything all week. You just like go to meetings, send emails, like
yep.
You can talk to people in the hallway. And so like to your point about male ambition, it's like if you think that your only responsibility to a family is like a breadwinner, and then you come home and like you can have like, service with a smile or whatever because like you're the breadwinner. We can go back to that 2 income, 1 income thing in a second, but like it almost feels like the way that I don't want to like make this a macro econ thing, but it almost feels like the way that like companies hire actually like encourages males to be mediocre, because it's like, we'll give you money for like doing nothing really all week, like nothing strategic or forward thinking, and you don't have to develop any ambition, and you'll like keep collecting this paycheck unless we go bankrupt, you know?
Yeah.
And like, it's like most dudes would probably take that deal because you get covered and like you don't have to do that much, you know?
Well, I can't say anybody wouldn't, honestly.
Right.
Like, to be honest, I mean, I would take that deal, and I love my life as a freelancer.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I would enter back into corporate America for a paycheck where I did nothing like that.
Right, for sure.
And I have on occasion.
Yeah. Well, there's a degree of stability to it that's like, if you freelance for a while, which both of us have at this point, it's like sometimes you're just like, man, stability would be pretty sweet, you know? So then I don't have to like, I would say like, if you want to talk about mediocre, I would say probably like between Thanksgiving and Christmas last year, 2017, just because partially like people weren't paying invoices and shit because it was the holiday season. I was like basically every morning just like checking my Wells Fargo, being like, do I have enough like to get through the next like 24 hours, you know? Like, if I get invited to a Christmas party on December 15th, like, can I go to it and if it's not open bar, you know? So from that moment, like being a mediocre male financially in that moment, like obviously I see what both of us are saying and what I just put forth about stability, you know? So it has validity in those moments. The other thing I thought was interesting that you were talking about is, well, one income versus two income, because I do think there's been a lot of studies recently about like economic stagnation or just like companies keeping wages down. Not everybody can go work for like some hot startup that has a bunch of venture capital money. A lot of people get screwed salary wise, and like if you want to have a mortgage and have kids and all this crap like that, you know, you're supposed to want to have, it's like that stuff all costs money. Kids cost a lot of money. Like,
Well, and that's another problem too. And let's touch on that for a second, is that supposed to want to do, right?
Right.
The supposed to, the shoulds, the parts where you should all over yourself, because I should have had kids by now, right? I should have written my award-winning book. There's all these shoulds or supposed tos that even now, even though we're getting rid of a lot of that, like I don't see my nephew's generation being as hard on their kids as the Xers have been on theirs, or the boomers were on theirs, or even before that.
I agree with that. And I think that should culture, like middle class marker stuff, is ridiculous, because I know I got friends in Boston, and it's like, this is like always so paradoxical to me, and we're going off of mediocre men, but it's still interesting. It's like, they had a kid, the kid's probably like 15, 18 months old right now, and like the wife is like, oh, this is so great, like pressuring for a second kid. The dude is like a little bit more realistic, and he's like, we can't afford this. And in the same arc of this kid getting to 18 months, the first kid, they bought a house, and it's like, to stay in the Boston area, their mortgage is probably like $800K or something, right?
Right.
It's like, you can't afford that shit. So now here's what happens. Like, there's this domino effect where their sets of parents have to like take from their earnings to like help with this mortgage. So now, like, if their parents live into their 90s or something, like there's not money there because they like, gave money to the kids.
Right.
Now, like, the wife is going to ultimately win out on this second kid thing. They're going to end up with a second kid. So like, he was bitching about all this to me once, and I was like, man, like at some point, you just need to move to like Tulsa, Oklahoma, and just get like 2 new jobs where you can get the same size house for like $100,000, you know?
Right.
And so then he says to me something like, well, like our friends are in Boston. And I'm like, motherfucker, like if you have 2 kids under 2, like how often are you seeing your friends, you know? So it's just weird. Like, it feels like we have to like hit these marks or boxes because like, we should, but then like nobody considers the repercussions like beyond the marker we're trying to hit. Like when you have 2 kids, all this money stuff changes, all this like relationship to your friends changes, relationship to each other changes, like relationship to your parents changes, because now they're like mainly viewing themselves as grandparents and no longer parents. So like all this crap changes, and like all we're doing is thinking like, oh man, I want 2 kids and a house in the suburbs. And it's like you just changed the entire ecosystem of like 6 people's lives because you wanted to do that. Sorry, that was like a mini rant, but
Well, and I think that's, back when our parents were growing up, they still had some semblance of even being a mediocre breadwinner was still almost enough to contain a family for more than what we wanted. Like, we could go on vacations for the most part, even at a minimum wage job, which my dad worked quite a few of. We could still go on these family excursions, and we didn't spend like Disney money, but we weren't stuck at home. And now, like, it's a fight to figure out how to get to Europe when I want to go, because it's so expensive that I have to like lock down some serious freelancing.
Right, for sure.
In order to, and I'm not talking, and nothing I would consider mediocre, which is why it becomes an issue, because when people just sit there and do status quo, then it takes more people to do a job.
Yep.
When people are not, when people are not driven, and, to just do a good job, good job and be replaceable. And that's a big thing, right? Be replaceable. That's the other thing. People are so afraid of being replaced that they aren't replaceable. And if you're replaceable, you can't move up.
Right. Well, so like Andy Grove, who founded Intel, that's his big thing. His big theory thing is that he says the best managers make themselves completely replaceable, so that like the system works well enough that they can be moved up or they can go do their own thing. And it's like they don't need to be there anymore. But like you said, and I think this is more common in guys just from what I've observed, it feels like guys are terrified. I mean, women care about their relevance, but it feels like guys are terrified about like being perceived as irrelevant or incompetent. And then paradoxically, they often make themselves irrelevant and come off as incompetent in the process, And
I think that's just a moniker that women have just been given. I think we've just kind of been seen as irrelevant and incompetent based completely on gender for so long that we fight against that. And that's why we are ready to excel to top positions and walk right past the men that are doing mediocre, which creates that perpetual pissed off thing and mediocrity. Like, if they're going to get it anyway, why try?
Right. Well, it's almost funny because like when you were first saying that last section, I was thinking about like lean in or whatever.
Yeah.
And like men actually like in some ways like lean into mediocrity because it's so like common and obvious and easy for them to
comfortable
grasp. Right. And because like y'all have been told for so long like you're not good enough, you're like weaker, you can't run a boardroom or whatever the hell the narrative is, that like you have to fight against it actively, whereas dudes can basically be like, okay, if I like play golf with the right people and have like good quarters here and there, like eventually I'll get up to here as opposed to here, So I just think it's kind of funny, like guys are almost encouraged to quote unquote lean into like being mediocre as opposed to like excelling, because you don't need to like push back against anything. Like complacency can actually get you somewhere. And that
all you need to do is buy the boss a drink once a year and purchase the golf cart, during the round of golf.
And that like that should not be normative for how we think about like advancing people with like ambition and like quote unquote entrepreneurial skills or whatever,
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, I don't know. Okay, I would say like the easiest resolution to it is like advance more females, because you see studies all the time about how they have better financial returns, which is important to shareholder people, and they lead more empathetic companies. People actually want to go to work. And I mean, I'm sure like in some cases that's not true, but I would assume it's largely true. I just don't know, because right now, like 64-year-old white guys hold like all the power strings in society. So like, I don't know who's going to start advancing these women. That would be like the easiest solution to me, because I don't think you can just go and fix elements of masculinity whereby like I could still get rewarded for like half-assing something if I'm doing the right like political things, whereas you would have to work 3 times as hard to overcome that, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if masculinity can be fixed in that regard.
I don't
Because
know if that's something we necessarily want to fix, though, right? Wouldn't that just be a skill, a different skill we'd want to teach?
right, right. And I mean, I just think it also goes to like, you go back to like my friends that have 2 kids, 3 kids, whatever. If you're going to do that and like change your whole financial structure in the process, like actively parent those kids, especially boys,
Yes.
and teach them about like empathy and like, you know, caring for others, like being there for others when shit's messed
Yep.
up. Is like, I hate, like, you ever go to a restaurant or a bar and you see like a family of 5 and like the mom and dad just dispense like 3 iPads, and you're like, dude, why did you have these kids in the first place? Like,
Right.
for your own relevance, because you don't actually want to interact with them at a meal. So like, I get that, like, I'm not a parent, but I get that you would be like busy and stressed and all that. Like, that totally resonates. But like, why would you do that if that's what you're going to do consistently when it's a family situation, you know?
Right.
So
Well,
that's
we
why
weren't
I kind of
treated
feel
that
like,
way, though, right? When we went out with our parents, of course, it's a different time. We didn't have all this. There might have been a Pac-Man in the corner at the
right,
restaurant, you know?
right,
There wasn't, we didn't have all this. And so there is an amount of that. I take huge issue with, and we don't do this with my nephews, so either of my nephews. So this
okay,
is, I'm proud of my sister and brother for this. We don't use TV as the babysitter most of the time. They have to be occupied somehow doing
yeah,
something. And don't get me wrong, they do each have their tablets and they do have their electronics. And my
right,
brother's really into video games, so my nephew really is into video games on that side. And I guess my other nephew's really into Minecraft, so they let him do that, but not all the time. Like his
yeah,
screen
it's not
time is so small. But
yeah,
we grew up where that wasn't allowed. We
right,
didn't get. My dad was a videographer and played on the video equipment all the time, and
right,
that's, you know, we did
right,
get HBO when it finally came out, you know, but so we got the Muppet Show on Saturday night. We didn't get to sit in front of the TV,
right.
and there's an amount of that
But,
my
yeah,
generation is screwing up as far
yeah.
as I'm concerned.
Like
I
when
don't
they
want to
said
mom
that,
shame or dad shame anybody, and that's not the point of what I'm saying.
well, it's almost the same. I don't want to do that either, but it's almost the same. Like, man, I see female friends of mine have kids, and you get this stuff where like you'll see every day the mother will put up like a 82 photo like Instagram story, and I'm like, dude, who's parenting this kid? Like, I get they're a newborn or a 1-year-old, but like the process of doing that and assembling that is taking away from like active lessons that a person should get from their mother. So it's like, these are kind of like, this is going to be a future topic for us, but these are kind of like one of the dark sides of like technology that we assume is just this utopia. But it's like, man, people are using this stuff and like going away from their actual responsibilities, you know, including parenting.
Well, and that's the thing, and there's this uptick in influencer,
Oh yeah,
you know, uh, how many followers can I get? How many likes can I get? And I can start making money off of this. And I don't blame anybody. Look, man, everybody wants that.
right,
But 15 seconds of fame is going to literally last you 15 minutes. I mean, you might make a few $1,000s off that, but you're not going to,
right,
you can't ride that wave. You have to be able to consistently, and you have to, I think it's a matter of respecting yourself and your family, I guess. I don't know respect feels like not quite the right word.
yeah. I mean, I know what you're saying. To me, it is a matter of like respecting your family and respecting the choice that you made to bring these people into it, and what are you going to do
Right.
to make that next generation better? Because we already know that with like tech and like other stuff in society and like how CEO type people think, like there's going to be less jobs there. So like higher education is like a mess of a concept. So like those things have to be navigated by society. But like if you're choosing to bring like 2 to 3 boys into the world, you know, that's the hand that you get dealt. Like, okay, they're going to face challenges in 22 years that like you didn't face, I didn't face, people that are 5 years old right now aren't facing. But like, the least you can do, like the lowest bar possible, is like just prepare them to be like caring, empathetic people that have like some degree of ambition, even if like the Microsoft account manager like path through the world isn't there, because those jobs are getting automated out. It's
Right.
like, you know, they can still be like people with ambition that care about others. And like, I do think that's probably the onus for that is on like parents, grandparents, and like school systems, you know. I guess those would be the big three in terms of how most American families tend to be organized, you know. But that, I guess, is where you like, because I agree with you from the beginning, is like men need to have like more ambition in general, like not get to this like level or outstrip your actual level and end up like fuddling around all day, you know. Like I just feel like
or hit you as soon as you have a kid, like, oh crap, I need to do better.
right, like I need to like set an example here too, you know. Yeah, so
Because there's
that,
always somebody watching. You know, I think it comes back to, you and I have talked about this a lot too, and I think just all of this boils down to, including the male mediocrity, and there's female mediocrity as well. I've done it. I've had ridiculously high paying jobs that I did nothing at for, you know, months, and I floated through it, and I don't regret it, first of all, because who wouldn't turn that down, or who would turn that down?
right.
I think it comes back to human connection, and we know the technology's not coming away, so I think that, and we've been saying it for years, but we really just need to try harder, you know, to get together, to come together at meals, at meetings, literally be present with each other. So, you know, when we meet, when I'm when I see my nephews next, I mean, we don't walk around with our phones in our hands, you know, we interact with them. Again, don't get me wrong, they have their technology and they are allowed to play with their technology.
It's not omnipresent, and that's important.
Right. And that's a big deal, I think, is it, and maybe what's causing a lot of rifts with the younger generations and their parents, why we're seeing an uptick in, honestly, I think we're only seeing an uptick in violence. I think half of it has to do with the media coverage. We're on a 24-hour media cycle now.
Right.
We never were.
Yep.
You know, but I think another degree of that is that we as parents we're not paying attention because we're not connecting, and we're not teaching connection. And I think that's a really big thing. We're not, I shudder to think what would happen if I stopped telling my nephew I believe in you.
Right, for sure. And I mean, I don't like, I know tons of people, not tons, but like, let's say a dozen people that have young kids now, and I would reckon, like, I'm not there in every moment, but I would reckon that like up through 5 to 7 in some cases they haven't said that, you know. And it's like, I agree, obviously we're talking at like a 35,000 foot level and each family's different, but I do think that like there's a context where the connection side of it isn't there, as we've been saying, you know. And like it's easy / try to like blame technology for that. Technology is part of it for sure, but it's also like I don't even know sometimes if like these people, when they get thrown into it, know how to parent, or like know how to parent a boy versus a girl, you know. Like
we weren't taught that though. We were latchkey kids. Both parents were out of the homes working. We weren't given parenting skills. We weren't taught parenting skills because our parents did the best they could with what they had, but they had to work outside the home. They weren't constantly home focusing on the family.
Yeah. Man, I'll give you this story as like a way to start wrapping it up, because I got to go to this thing in a little while. But like, I was at Keen's, which is a bar in New York. It's on 36th and 5th. It was like 6 years ago. And there was a table of 4 women next to me. Like, I was sitting at the bar. There was a table in the bar area. And like, one of them said something like, my husband makes $700,000 a year, so I think that it's my obligation to have 4 kids. And I was probably like 2-3 drinks in, like I was just drinking beer or whatever, but I like lost it and went over there and was like, what did you just say? And she's like, you know, like, my husband makes a lot of money, so I think that I should have 4 kids. And I'm like, do you not understand that, like, for a dude to make that amount of money, he's not going to be present that much because, like, if work is paying him that much, they expect him there, you know? So,
Yeah.
like, if you have 2 boys or fucking 1 boy and 3 girls, whatever, like, that boy is, like, in a lot of trouble from the jump because, like, his dad's not going to
Yep.
be around that much, you know? And she was, like, adamant that, like, her theory made perfect sense. And, okay, I don't think I'll ever make $700,000 a year. I could see no world where that happens. But, like, I don't even think rationally that I would ever think that or make that connection. It's like, just because you have more resources, you're not entitled to more children. Just, like, have the children you decide to have as a couple or whatever and do the best you can with it. Like, it's not a financially tied metric, in my opinion, you know? And just the fact that that line of thinking is out there, I think causes some of these problems too, you know?
Right. Yeah. And as somebody who actively decided to not have children many, many years ago, I of course don't understand that line of thinking. Like, if somebody had come along or does come along and children end up being a part of it, great. But I don't get, that's something that people need to understand, is that's a financial thing. Like, I don't know. Anyway.
For sure.
And honestly, if that guy's making $700,000 a year, he's
Yeah.
not being mediocre.
No, and he probably actually has some degree of ambition somewhere. So,
right. And it might involve
guys
children.
capable of.
Right. It might involve children, but it's not going to involve being present in their lives, because if he's making that kind of money, he is busy.
Right. He's beholden to somebody else, like
Right.
not even his wife or family, you know?
Right.
That's the unfortunate reality there. The other thing I want to figure out is what do you want to do next time out? Do you have an idea, or do you want me to propose one? Because, I mean, I feel like we could go solid like 30, 40 on a bunch of different stuff, you know?
Oh, we can. I have a bunch of friends that are waiting on us to do some like HR and business kind of management kind of
We'll
talk.
do one of those next time. And I can probably do this time next week if you can, because I'm going to like an Indeed.com conference, but I come back Wednesday morning, like late
Nice.
morning. So I'll be home by then.
Cool.
And I'd have my laptop even if I get fucking stranded in a city again, which has already happened to me 3 times this year. So yeah.
I gave you the ability to move that meeting around, by the way.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right, well, this was awesome, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for hopping on with me.
Yeah, and we'll definitely let's start doing them consistently, and then we can see like where it goes, and maybe someday we can build an empire out of it, you know.
I think that people just need to talk like this, honestly. I mean,
for sure. All right, well, gracias, and I'll send a tweet about how awesome it was and you are and stuff in a second.
No worries, thanks. I'm gonna put the bookends on this video with the theme music and some title stuff and our handles, and get it uploaded to YouTube. So I'll let you know when that's all.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ted.
All right, bye.
See ya.